Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, a team that we've talked extensively about during this offseason. Dan Lanning, the Oregon Ducks, kicking off their 2024 season, playing host to Idaho. Now, there's a reason that the sports books aren't listing a line on this game. We don't expect it to be particularly competitive, especially with how high we are on this Oregon team heading into 2024. That being said, I think there's a lot of fascinating storylines heading into this matchup. And Dill, most of our conversations around Oregon during this offseason have really centered around what do we need to see from Oregon to really become a national championship caliber team heading into 2024, where you make no mistake, it is national championship or bust for this Oregon roster, which is amazing to say. Dan Lanning, 3 years, you're already talking about national championship or bust, and it kind of seems like it's going to be that way for the next 15 years. Want to get into a few big storylines, some things that we're looking for from this Oregon team kicking off against Idaho, fired up to get into it. Now, before we do it, as always, one of the Oregon Duck fans that cannot thank you guys enough for all the support y'all have shown all summer long, all offseason long. I mean, there's not a lot of programs and fan bases that listen to the boys talk football in the middle of the summer. The Oregon fans have been one of those fan bases. We can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, though, what are you looking for out of this Oregon team week one against Idaho? Again, might not be that competitive of a football game. That being said, there's still a lot of new faces coming into this Oregon team. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. And Dill, without further ado, I'll give you the tee box here. Let's start with this Oregon offense. Your biggest storyline heading into week one. What do you got?
I mean, honestly, the big thing that I'm looking for is their passing distribution, if you will, and where the ball is going. Because Oregon's kind of got that good problem, if you will, that there's only one ball, and they have a lot of weapons on that outside or on the outside, on the inside at the tight end spot. They got a lot of guys they got to use. And the guy I'm really looking for is Evan Stewart, because I kind of think about what Dillon Gabriel liked to do at Oklahoma. His natural fit is Tez Johnson. Yes. I certainly expect Tez Johnson to kind of be the leader in the clubhouse, if you will, in the wide receiver room, leading in yards, leading in catches, leading in targets, all those metrics. But having said that, I do think Evan Stewart has to have a big role in this offense, and I'm kind of looking forward to seeing how they use him because, again, I think we know how they're going to use Tez Johnson, probably a very similar way they used him last year, and Dillon Gabriel likes to play that style of ball. But I really hope they can use not Tez Johnson, but obviously Evan Stewart.
You talk about Evan Stewart, one of the most slept-on players in all of college football. I just feel like nobody's talking about this kid coming to this Oregon offense where, Dill, to answer your question, how does Evan Stewart get involved in this Oregon offense? I think two different things I have. One, we're looking to replace the production that Troy Franklin left, particularly the kind of wide receiver that Troy Franklin was, right? Tez Johnson is your short, intermediate route tree guy that's going to be a dog after the catch. Troy Franklin was your guy that really pressed teams vertically down the field, right? If you did not put a safety over top of Troy Franklin, you were probably going to get burned. Evan Stewart can bring that exact same skill set to this Oregon offense. And you talk about all the different ways and really different levels that Will Stein and Oregon can attack opposing defenses. That's probably the role that I think Evan Stewart can come in and play. And that's probably
kind of hope like they expand that out for him a little bit too.
That's my second narrative is, hey, I'm a massive fan of Troy Franklin, right? But he was a little bit of a one-trick pony, right? And again, the Oregon fans know who've been rocking with the boys for really the last 2 years. Troy Franklin was my guy. He was a little bit of a one-dimensional wide receiver, really only working vertically. Evan Stewart brings that capability into the wide receiver room, but he's much more versatile. He's a guy that can separate. He's a guy that can work the middle of the field. He's a guy that can really operate after the catch as well. So Evan Stewart kind of fills in that Troy Franklin void, but I think that Evan Stewart can also bring a little bit more to this Oregon offense.
Yeah, that's the one thing. I mean, I'm really looking at his role, but I think you could frankly say that for a lot of guys on this team. I mean, you look not only in the wide receiver room, but where's Trayshawn Holden fit in? Where's the guy like Kyle Casper, who I think really brings a unique skill set that they don't really have in a known fashion, if you will, yet. But I also think you look into that tight end room, and Terrence Ferguson, I still certainly think will be the guy. But, man, I'm really interested to see what they do with Kenyon Sadiq. And I'm not sure they throw the kitchen sink at Idaho necessarily, or empty the clip, if you will. But I kind of want to see how they start to use some of these guys that maybe aren't our focal point.
You're reading my notes right off my paper. That was my biggest storyline. And every time I sit down and read the fall camp notes from Oregon, sit down every morning. I drink my cup of coffee. I read what's going on within this Oregon program coming out of fall camp. Every single time I sat down, I heard the name Kenyon Sadiq. This kid's going to be a difference maker. I think the question is, how do they get him involved in this offense? And hey, I trust Will Stein to do it the right way. And like you said, I don't know if Oregon is going to show all their cards in terms of how they want to use Kenyon Sadiq. Week 1 against Idaho, you probably save that for when Ohio State comes to town. That being said, Will Stein's a great offensive coordinator because he knows how to get his playmakers the football in space. Kenyon Sadiq sounds to be just truly a unicorn. When he is on the football field, how are we using him? How are we getting him the football? Probably my most exciting storyline heading into this matchup. Now, Dill, I think the last thing I want to talk about, I know you want to talk about the offensive line, so we'll get there, but I want to focus in on Dillon Gabriel just a little bit in terms of, can he just take over from where Bo Nix left off? Why are we so high on Dillon Gabriel coming to this Oregon offense? We think he can supply the exact same thing that Bo Nix gave to this Oregon offense, specifically in that 2023 year. Everybody wants to come at Bo Nix in terms of just being a game manager. Well, hey, idiots, not Oregon fans. Obviously, you guys are Bo Nix truthers. But everyone else, because I'm a little frustrated because I'm a J.J. McCarthy guy, Michigan fan. Bo Nix is going to start week 1 for the Denver Broncos. Like, Bo Nix was a very good quarterback, but what made him so good in that Oregon offense is he was in such command of the offense, right? The ball came out on time, accurately to his playmakers, letting them operate after the catch. Dill, we think Dillon Gabriel is that perfect fit. I just want to see Dillon Gabriel come out, and I don't really care what the stat line looks like. I want to see him come out and just operate the offense just like we saw Bo Nix do all of 2023.
Oh, I kind of care about the stat line. I really I want to see that completion percentage sky high.
Got to start padding the stats for the Heisman candidacy.
I've had the stats for the Heisman candidacy, but also, like, I mean, when you're outclassing a team by this much, I think, again, when you think about what Bo Nix was doing, when the throws were there, they were hit, and they were hit almost every time.
Yeah.
You're playing an Idaho Vandal team that obviously is far beneath where Oregon's at. I think you don't want to see the ball hitting the ground. That'd make me kind of think like, okay, they'll be just fine. They'll be able to play with the rhythm they played with under Bo Nix, and things aren't going to change. Because at the end of the day, I think that's kind of what you want out of this Oregon offense. Maybe you want to unlock a few things. You add obviously some really, really talented players, Evan Stewart being the primary example, but then some young guys coming up through the program. You got those guys coming as I knock a can of energy drink over. You kind of want to see some of that stuff unlocked, but at the end of the day, you want the base of this offense to kind of be the same, where it runs really, really smooth.
Last thing that I want to talk about, I'm just a little excited to see Dante Moore in the second half. Like this, I know you're a big Dante Moore fan. I'm a big Dante Moore fan. We know it's not going to be in 2024. This kid's so talented. I think it's a perfect landing spot for him. I'm excited to just see him get a little bit of work in the second half. And the last thing, offensive line, replacing a guy like Powers Johnson. Look, we're really confident Poncho can physically get it done. One of the things I'm looking for is you look at Powers Johnson. Why was he so special? Not only the best center physically on the football field, but, man, he had that offensive line working as a unit. Poncho's a little bit younger. Now, it helps to have a 6-year quarterback in Dillon Gabriel giving a little bit of support to the young center. How does the pass protection look? How are they picking up blitzes? Because, again, you go back to the film of Oregon in 2023, they did not miss blitz pickups. And I think a lot of that had to do with Powers Johnson at the center position. You want to see clean pass, bro, from this Oregon team. You know they're going to win their ones, but you want to see them pick up some blitzes and kind of show that they're not going to miss a beat on the inside of the offensive line.
Yeah, I agree. Again, you just want to see the operation really clean because everything was really clean for Oregon last year. You just want to see that train stay right on the tracks. Again, I think they should have no real problem doing that. You bring in a Matthew Bedford who may not play, obviously, this week, but will be ready at some point. Your veteran there, Poncho, got a chance to learn under Powers Johnson. I really don't see why they shouldn't just –
yeah, you just want to see them kind of do what they did in 2023. And one other thing is I'm kind of interested to see the tackle depth. You know what I mean? Like Johnny Cornelius and Josh Connolly Jr., there's no like replacing those guys because they're 2 first-round NFL talents. But if you do have to operate in a game without them for a little bit of time, like do you have the tackle depth to kind of get that done? Probably the last thing I'm looking for. Going over to the defensive side of the football, I got a couple of things. One, and this is probably the most important storyline for this Oregon team as a whole, and probably the number one thing I'm looking for. What do the edge rushers look like? Do you talk about Oregon taking that step to be a national championship team? It's having difference makers on the defensive line where Oregon was good last year. I don't know if they were great. they have a lot of guys going into year 2 that could be great, right? Blake Purchase, Mateo Yu, Tatum Tuioti. Can those guys show that they've taken that year 2 jump? And if they have, like, sign me up for the shirts. I think Oregon's a national championship caliber football team.
Especially now, because you've seen the teams that have kind of gotten over that hurdle. If like even Michigan last year, when they played a team like Washington, they could smother them a little bit up front with their defensive line. And I think you kind of see, I mean, this is year 3 for Dan Lanning. He's had his chance to get his guys into the program, develop them the way and he wants them to. And you got those sophomores. And Amarion Winston, we should probably throw in there because he is another guy who's flashed some real potential. But those 4 young guys, I'll say, I think you really want to see them kind of grow into their own and dominate in a way I don't think you've seen Oregon's defensive line dominate yet. And I think they'll do that against Idaho. But again, if you see real thorough domination from that group, I think that gives you more confidence going forward as you get into more of the meat of the schedule that these guys are on the right track to taking that step and being real.
Love the Amari and Winston shout out. Dale, we catch a lot of flack for not mentioning him, and that's straight up on us. Like, Winston can play. I think we get a little we talk a lot of recruiting, so we like to talk about the young cats. That's on us. Like, Winston's a guy that is going to play a role in this Oregon defense. Last thing that I'll probably mention is linebackers playing fast. It's kind of a similar story that we just talked about the defensive line. You look at Jeff Bossa, Justin Jacobs, and I would even throw in a guy like Devin Jackson. You saw really solid linebacker play last year. I don't know if you saw difference maker caliber linebacker play last year. We think they're capable of being difference makers. And I think a large part of it has to do with just playing a little bit faster between the ears. Like, hey, Justin Jacobs, he's a freak show in terms of the physical traits that he brings to the table. Now we want to see him put it together mentally, having a full, healthy offseason. How does this linebacker room look? Are they playing downhill? Are they making their plays at or behind the line of scrimmage? Probably the last thing that I'll be looking for this Oregon Ducks defense.
And that's just, are they playing the way I expect Dan Lanning linebackers to play? I mean, we've seen him coach linebackers at Georgia, those Nakobe Dean type players, to Channing Tindalls. I mean, guys who just flew around with their hair on fire, making plays, kind of what you said, at or behind the line of scrimmage very consistently. Is that mentality in these linebackers now? And Jeffrey Bossa, I think, had a really, really good year. I feel like sometimes when you talk about this, kind of not issue with their linebacker core, but almost that want to see it more dominant. I think people insinuate that we're like saying Jeffrey Bossa is no good. I mean, they were both very good for the most part, but I think there is another gear to get to, especially for Justin Jacobs, who the physical tool set's so much there. Again, just want to see him playing with the mentality that we've seen Dan Lanning's linebackers play.
Yeah, I'll take a quote out of Dan. Well, I'm actually not sure if Dan Lanning's actually said this, but it sounds like something Dan Lanning would say. Good to great. I bet Dan Lanning has said something along those lines in team meetings. That's kind of what we're looking for from this Oregon defense. Like, they were good last year. Can they go be great in 2024? Kind of fascinated about how the secondary rotation shakes out. You got just a dummy amount of talent. I'm just kind of interested. We know Jabbar Muhammad is kind of CB1. We kind of know what we have with the veteran safeties. I'm fired up to see Aaron Flowers. And then what's the cornerback 2 situation? How much are they rotating those guys? Dan Lanning has said in the press conference, we got a lot of good football players. We got to figure out how to get them on the football field. Trust Dan Lanning to do that. Just kind of interested to see what that rotation does look like, because there's been some stiff competition at that cornerback spot opposite Jabbar Muhammad. Bill, we'll close it out there. Again, this is a team that we've been talking a lot about for a lot of months. Now we get to go see them put on the pads. The boys are fired up. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later.